Hi everyone, welcome to the YouTube channel Sports Talk at Calle Serrano. It is a pleasure for me to have today a great panel, including Andrea Bozza from Milan.
Hi,
Hello,
Lucio.
Andrea.
How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. And you?
I'm okay. I'm in my bunker, as you know.
As we can see. And then we have Pierfilippo Capello. Ciao, Pier.
Hello, Lucio. Ciao. Hello, everybody. Very happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
You're welcome. And then we have Matthias, Nicolai from Vicenza.
Hi, Lucio. Thanks for the invitation.
And Vittorio Rigo, who will join us in a while. So first of all, I would like to thank ISDE because ISDE Law and Business School is helping us to promote all of our events, and is letting me represent such an important institution in these webinars. So today's topic will be the FIFA RSTP reforms, amendments, and that Andrea Bozza will talk about that. Then we will talk about football coaches' contract, and Pierfilippo will give us a lecture on that. And then we will talk about FIFA regulation on working with intermediaries, and FIFA, and about like the FIFA framework proposals for football agents. And Matthias and Vittorio will be able to tell us more about that important topic. So I think that we can start with Andrea. So I happily give you the floor, Andrea. Tell us.
Thank you.
Which are the changes of FIFA?
I'll try to be short, so I'll take a couple of hours to explain reform packages enacted by FIFA. I'm very grateful for when Lucio proposed me the topic. I tried to get the topic of the other two speakers, so either agents or coaches, but he said no, you should really go for the large package. So I'm very grateful for Lucio to do that in a short time. I'm already wasting my time. So I'll try to be concise, to focus maybe on 3-4 topics that are worth mentioning today. Of course, one of the big issues about the reform package is about agents. So on that one, I'll pass the ball on to my colleagues in Vicenza, and happy to do so. And the jure condendo, let's say, one of the biggest reform we expect from FIFA in the RSTP would include or could include coaches. So again, I'll pass the little ball in this case to my partner Pierfilippo. So, long story short, to say that the reform package really kicked off at the end of 2017 when FIFA had a share of complaints from FIFPro before the European Commission regarding the transfer system. This, gray cloud of FIFA sort of system. There was an agreement at what we used to call the stakeholders committee, this strange animal grouping together the key players of football, players being players, but also football clubs, representatives of association, confederation, so FIFPro, the ECA, the World League Forum. So that stakeholder committee, in a number of discussions, meetings, and so on, came up with this reform process, starting with the narrow issues, the so-called narrow issue, issues that could be resolved in an easy, quick way, always, so to say. So, but the agreement, that what was important about the agreement on narrow issue, that it was enough to make FIFPro comfortable to withdraw from the complaint before the European Commission. FIFPro has already been mentioned a couple of times in this brief introduction, but it's really the engine here to promote RSTP at the very outset of the regulations and also in relation to the reforms. So, major changes to RSTP. I mean, immediately there were big steps from the process that we see now in transfers, and those changes included direct consequences for the parties that did not comply with economic decisions by FIFA bodies. And those who had a case before FIFA now would know that, particularly in front of DRC, they have 45 days limit to comply with the decision. Otherwise, the decision will already include sport consequences for lack of compliance. So I'll go back to that at the end of this presentation, but I think it is a pillar reform. Another piece of reform involved from the very outset of the package, two examples of what just cause could be. Sort of just cause, of course, talking about what the termination cause could be in the regulation, and an express prohibition of what we call contractual grace periods, and also some changes in Article 70 on unilateral termination with regard to the compensation mechanism when a contract is terminated, in particular by introducing additional compensation from players when there are overdue payables linked to termination, or payables linked to termination. Then what followed was the so-called white paper, which was put together again by FIFA and the main stakeholders in the middle of 2018, and that's led now to the reform, which is moving forward right now, and identified several issues within the transfer system that were wrapped together for discussion to see whether or not they were within the FIFA purpose moving forward in this modernized global digital world. So moving from there, from that level of discussion, there was 3 reform packages actually, and the first one was back in October 2018, and involved 3 key issues: the introduction of electronic registration of transfer system at international level, the so-called FIFA clearing house, at least as a principle, because as we know, clearing house will have to come into place in the future months, and general principles, so already touching upon agents and solidarity mechanism. So electronic registration. So this all stemmed from a research designed to support initially the clearinghouse system. There was this research run by professionals at FIFA that demonstrated that more than half of member associations had a domestic transfer system based on paper. Literally paper. So they could have in the best cases, they could have a Microsoft Excel or sheet saying Andrea is moving from club A to club B, or Matthias from club C to club D. That was sort of, I don't want to say ridiculous, but in the modern digital world, it appeared as a necessary reform, because the reality was that, and the consequence was a lack of tracking of the player's history for the purposes then downstream of calculating training compensation. That resulted in turn in clubs being, a lot of clubs being, creditors of a ridiculous amount of training compensation unpaid. So the objective of that package was ultimately to be able to provide reliable players' history. Now, there is now an ongoing process compliance with the association that need to comply by 1st of July this year, and that hopefully will lead to a second part of the reform package of the clearinghouse. So a lot has been said about the clearinghouse then. So electronic system, clearinghouse in itself. There's been a lot of debate on the clearinghouse. But long story short, the way in which FIFA awards training compensation is a system where clubs have to recognize that they need recognize that they might be entitled to some payment. They would raise their hand and say, "Listen, I'm a creditor. I need this money. I'm entitled to this money." Okay, and they would ask for training and solidarity payments. So again, that research, to go back to a little bit the background of the reform, showed that there was a huge gap between the training reward money that was due and the amount that was actually paid. So to just cite some relevant data, in 2018 was something like $350 million due and only $90 million being effectively paid. The gap was a significant one. So what the clearinghouse would do within that system, they would integrate with the electronic registration system, an electronic passport of players, to then result in a mechanism where the distribution would be automatic. Distribution of money would come as an automatic element. Ultimately, this would bring money back to clubs where that have merit of having trained players, and this will also reduce necessarily discussions as to whether a payment is due or not. Therefore, litigations. We would expect less litigation with that. What is the purpose? Who is the real addressees of these reforms? Well, I would say lower clubs that are more vulnerable and lack the ability to track the player histories. Think of African players, African clubs, South American clubs, and so on and so forth. So, a final element, I think, clearinghouse should be free of charge. So it's really an element of novelty introduced by FIFA. Second package passed this year, and of course subject to a lot of talk because it involved agent regulation, international loans, and training compensation or rewards. On football agents, again, leave the floor, pass the ball on to my colleagues. Am I in favor or not of what has been discussed so far? I'll leave it with a question mark, and maybe if there is space for debate later on, I'll be happy to give you what my initial views are. All right? Loans.
Sure.
Loans. You might have seen in the media that at the beginning of February there was an agreement for the first time to regulate loans, which have remained pretty much untouched from the introduction of RSTP. So why did FIFA decide to regulate loans at international level, but also to encourage a monitoring of loan system at national level? I think the white paper had the role in that. It identified the real purpose of what the real purpose of loans should be and what distortions could and on the market. So the real purpose of loan is to train young players, to develop players, to have them growing in perhaps somewhere which is not the original club, where they could have more chances to develop and to get into the real jungle, if you want. So that's the real purpose of loans. Against that purpose, our regulations are fit to the purpose? Well, yes and no, because they are insufficient. Loans are being abused. That's what the reasoning behind the reform is. So the agreement on loans was developed into the regulation passed by the stakeholders committee, provided that the numbers of international loans was to be limited and the concept of bridging was to be codified. I know Lucio has announced and will announce a special edition of his Calle Serrano talks on bridging, so I won't be spoiling speaker today, but bridging is an important element of this reform because it has been finally codified by FIFA with a number of uncertainties that will follow, I think, in the next coming years until we will have clear case law on that. And then the concept of sub-loan that was going to be banned. So the number of loans, again, we can discuss forever. Long story short, it will be limited and will lead to a simple system where when we get at the end of the 3 years transition period, a club will be able to loan in 6 players during any time in the season and loan out 6 players during any time in the season. So be allowed a maximum in or out 3 players from the same club, with one exception. The exception is remembering that the core objective of the development of young players. So FIFA has then another important element that shouldn't be forgotten is that FIFA has adopted the club-based homegrown player definition, which is a concept of European club competition regulations. Effectively, what happens is that an homegrown based player, an homegrown club-based player, as defined in regulation, is exempted from the 6 in and out rule that I said just before. So, but what happened in reality is the object of my presentation is FIFA reforms. I should say now today I was reading the new June 2020 RSTP that includes sort of a transition exception to the exception because with the COVID-19 outbreak, we will have now a special regime for certain rules. And on loan is probably one of the most affected areas of reform because that has been frozen. So whatever I just said is going to be put on hold by COVID-19 until when? Well, we don't know. For sure, in the next market transfer window, Hi, Vittorio, welcome. We will see that rule not taking place because primarily, and for one time, I must say, FIFA has realized that what the concrete and practical consequence will be in the transfer system next window. So to limit loans would possibly kill the next market, given the financial limitations and constraints most European clubs are going to face. So there was no sense for the loan limitation, which I could agree in principle on, would cause. So the final part then of this reform package in October, adopted by FIFA Council, was a change in training compensation system. So as you would know, the system has been relatively untouched since RSTP and since FIFA has introduced the transfer system. And particularly training costs have not been changed for quite a while. Effectively, what has been put in place, I think is going to be a simpler system, providing for more equal training compensation for clubs over the world. Regulations, in essence, would be universal, as opposed to having, for instance, an EU exception rule in the annexes. The most important thing is that training compensation system will be partly funded by an additional levy of 1%, which is going to be added to the 5% solidarity mechanism, based on, of course, always based on the transfer, the deal price, the transfer price in a transaction. So with the agreement of stakeholders committee, in particular the big clubs, that 1% is gonna help, because the idea for that fund, the 1% will be put in a fund so that the clubs with lower categories or pertaining to lower categories will need to pay less training compensation in the future than higher categories. So that fund will be used for the purposes of training compensation. 3 reforms packages. I've described the most important things. Then a few comments to finish up on my bit. As a lawyer, what I see as a revolution is Article 24 bis, because since in its introduction, many disputes are about, many disputes are about overdue payments. So parties don't pay. And probably the merit of 24 bis is already and will be more and more to make faster everything in this matter. If in a governance, from a governance perspective, but also from a party perspective, the thing that everything is faster is a good thing. So I'd say 24 bis in that it implies already in a decision by DRC, player status committee, single judge, or player status single judge of DRC. It provides already the consequences for not complying to a decision. It's a very important aspect. Article 14 bis as well, pivotal, I would say, in that termination for good cause in cases of overdue salary is an important thing. That we may debate whether the notice system, the 15-day notice system would work in practice or not, but it's certainly a positive change. Very last comment, Lucio, and I promise I'll stop there, and apologies if I took already far too long. I'd say what the system lacks is probably regulation on coaches, as I said, and possibly I agree with a friend of mine, Jan Kleiner from Switzerland, when he says possibly Article 17 is too long now. We have introduced so many specifications and so many provisions, and we have codified a number of important precedents in CAS that we now need to simplify, to split it, to simplify, or maybe it would be for the next commentary on RSTP to do so. But I think, regulation can be good or bad, can be simple, can be over-regulating, can be insufficient. It's important for it to be clear as well. And I think Article 17 has achieved amazing results from a legal perspective. As an interpreter, as a lawyer, as a practitioner, I think it should be streamlined a lot. End of it.
Yeah, I see. Thank you very much, Andrea. It was not so easy to resume the 3 reform packages of FIFA RSTP, but you were very clear, and I think we all could benefit from your speech. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lucio. Thank you.
And so let me introduce Vittorio Rigo to all of you. Hi, Vittorio. How are you?
Hello, everybody. Sorry for my late arrival. I was busy.
No worry.
So
no worry. You missed part of Andrea's speech, but no problems. Our talk will be recorded.
Okay.
You can watch it on demand. So it's time to move to Pierfilippo. He will talk about the football coaches' contracts, and I am very pleased to give him the floor. Pierre, you can start with your presentation.
Thank you very much, Lucio, and please do not hesitate to stop me if my presentation goes too long. And okay, we will talk about coaches or the regulation of coaches in football. Before getting into the matter, I would like to ask the people, to our audience, if they think to be able to give us a definition of what a club is in the FIFA rules. I'm pretty sure all of them will be able to find a way to give us a pretty clear and satisfying definition of a club. And then I would like to ask them, could you do the same with the definition of a player? And I believe it's even easier to find a definition of what a player is, a football player is, within the FIFA rules. Because FIFA rules allow us to find so many aspects, so many points, so many topics concerning clubs and players, that even if it doesn't exist a real definition of this kind of subjects, it's very easy to provide us with the definition. Well, if I would ask them, if I would ask you, would you be able to provide us with a definition of what a football coach is? I'm pretty sure they would find it much more difficult. And the reason is simple, because FIFA simply does not mention the coach almost ever in its rules. And to be strictly clear, FIFA has no definition of what a coach is. And FIFA has no regulation concerning the subject of coaches, and FIFA has no judicial bodies which could be very competent and specific for coaches. I believe all of you know that if you have a dispute regarding the relationship between a coach and a club, you would probably end in front of the FIFA Player Status Committee to discuss as a first degree to discuss this matter. And even the name of this committee, Player Status Committee, helps us understanding that, well, of course, FIFA didn't care so much about the situation of coaches. And missing this regulation for the coaches has some consequences that I would like to share with you and could be probably interesting in discussing about it. Well, have you ever wondered how does a club find the coach? It's easy to understand how a club finds a player. There is the transfer window. The club knows that within the beginning and the end of the transfer window, they can find and a player, have him signing a contract, and the rules explain very well which kind of player they can contact when and through which mechanisms they can get in touch with the player if his contract is going to expire within 6 months or is at the end of his contract and so on. You know all of this. Well, if a club wants to find a coach, there is no rule explaining to the club how to do it. Of course, I understand you can say, well, it means it's easier. No rules mean that everybody can have its own rule. Probably you're right, but you know that the football system, the sports system in general, and the professional football system in particular, they are scared of every situation where you don't have a clear rule to follow. So When a club in China, in South America, in United States, in Italy, in wherever you can think of, is looking for a coach, there is no market. It's impossible to buy and to sell a coach. Because FIFA and the sports system did never improve a system of transferring coaches. This is a problem, because who is suffering the worst effect of this status are the coaches themselves. Why do I say this? You all know that a football player is, among the other things, an asset for the club. If you check the balance sheets of a professional football club, you will see that players are, on one side, a cost due to their salaries, but on the other side, the players are an asset too, depending on how much the club paid them and how the amortization system works in that specific country. But the players are assets of the club. Well, the coach is not an asset. In the balance sheets of a football club, the coach is just a cost. There, the club has to pay the salary, and that's it. Well, if you think this is correct, I'm asking you, think of coaches like, I took notes here, Pep Guardiola, Jose Mourinho, Jurgen Klopp, Antonio Conte, what they did and how they changed and improved the clubs they moved to in the last 2 or 3 or 4 seasons. Don't you think that to the club, they are a most valuable asset than, for example, a middle level player, a player paid 2, 3, 4 millions? Well, this player is a big asset, 4 million, in the balance sheets of the club. But on the other side, let's talk about Liverpool. Jurgen Klopp is not an asset for the club. And if someone is trying to buy the Liverpool, 1 billion, 2 billion, whatever is the price, and you as lawyers or as accountant or managers, whatever is your role, are called to make an evaluation, to make the due diligence of the club. Well, you have to check if this player has been paid 4 millions. Okay, this is an asset for the club, for Liverpool. But you cannot put a value to Jurgen Klopp for the person who's buying Liverpool. Or if you're on the sell side, you can say, but you have a contract for Jurgen Klopp, who is now the best coach in the world, who brought this club to a brand new level of football. And so the coach is not an asset, because there is no coach market. You can't buy or sell a coach. And this is why the coaches are fired and the players are not. Because if a club is not happy of a player, they try to sell him even for a bad price, but they can sell him. I paid him 4 millions. Well, I'll try to sell him for 2, for 1. I'll give him on loan, but I can't simply fire the player, because I can make money from him. But if I'm not happy of the coach, I can't do any money with him. I can't sell him. I can't give on loan my coach. So the only thing I can do, if I'm not happy of the coach, I fire him. Of course, he says, I have no right, I have no just cause to fire him. He started claiming in front of FIFA, of the national authorities. Well, in a couple of years, maybe he's right, I'm wrong, or vice versa. But firing the coach now is not a problem for the club this season, this fiscal year. It's going to be a matter that someone will take care of within a couple of years. So this is the situation of the coaches now. Let me check. Yeah, we have. How much? 5 minutes? 10?
Yeah. Whatever you want.
And the absence of a regulation for coaches brings us to the second part of my speech today, which is the contracts for coaches. In the biggest leagues around the world, I would say Spain, England, Germany, France, I think MLS too, coaches, when they sign the contract, that's the same what happens for players and coaches. The leagues or the federation provide you with a form, with a document you have just to fill in with a few data, with a few information, and you must use this document. But as soon as you go out of the biggest and more educated, I would say, leagues and countries, I'm talking about football, of course, there are other countries where the league and the federation don't provide any help for coaches for their contract. So you have to write a brand new contract for the coach you are working with. And I usually ask to my students, and Lucio remembers this, what would you put in a contract? If you are called to draft a contract for a coach, of course, you would put the salary. This is important. And usually the students ask us, well, what else? The duration, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, but that's all. Well, to be honest, that's not all. Because first of all, since there is no definition of what a coach is or of what a coach does, you have to be extremely clear in the contract, explaining what the coach is paid for or will be paid for and what is not paid for. So the club can ask the coach to do specific things, what you wrote in the contract, and whatever is not in the contract, the coach cannot be asked to. This is very important. And then in the premises, we usually stress out why the club chose that coach. Is this coach a very old, famous coach who's been coaching around the world, he's experienced? And let's explain that the club wanted and was looking for someone who was bringing his experience, his savoir-faire, his attitude to the club. On the other side, if the coach is a young one, a young lion with not a great background, but is very famous to be tough, to be very hard on the players and on the opposites, well, you put this in the premises, explaining that the club didn't choose one coach. The club chose that coach for his specific and single attitudes. Because as soon as something doesn't work well, and in football you win and lose, and whenever the team loses, the first target to be culpable.
Sorry, Pierre, there is a delay. You freeze a little bit. Can you repeat?
Yes, from the beginning. I was just telling that you need in the premise to explain why the club chose one coach instead of another, and why did they choose that specific? Did they choose that specific coach? And then what the coach must and must not do, and which team he is paid to train. Just the first team, or the first and the second? Has he any responsibility concerning the youth teams or not? Because very often coaches want to be able to take decisions concerning the team B or the youth team, because that's the team where they cherry pick the best young players to be grown within the first team. So they want very often coaches want the second team, the team B or the youth team, to play with the same tactics of the first team, just to have the players to be ready when I moved, when I upgraded to the first team. Or what else? We can think of the coach cannot be asked to be scouting to check other clubs, other players. He can do it, but he just can say it's not my job to look for other players to buy in the next season. And last thing, Lucio, I'm sorry, you know we could go ahead with this for hours, but now on, all professional coaches, even those coaching in the second divisions and the third divisions, they don't move alone anymore. They have what is called staff. Staff means or may mean just the assistant coach, one person, or like it happens for big clubs, let's say the top 8 clubs playing Champions League or somewhere else. I think that today a coach has a staff of not less than 8 persons working for him. And hiring a coach, signing a coach for a club means signing 8, 9, 10 more contracts of the staff. FIFA, in just 2, 3, 4 days, last week, just published this kind of FAQ, frequently asked questions concerning the new guidelines for the COVID emergency. And one of the topics, one of the questions FIFA answered to was the guidelines concerning coaches are only for coaches, or do they are they about the staff too? And the answer was, well, even if FIFA mentioned just coaches, of course these guidelines could be applied to the staff too. Last point is, okay, but who is part of the staff? Of course, the assistant coach, the second assistant coach, the third assistant coach, the goalkeeper coach, the assistant of the goalkeeper coach, they are the staff. And then we have the physical coach, the athletic coach. Of course, he's a coach. But very often coaches bring their own doctor, their own physios. And these are...
Pierre, what about the match analyst? What about the translator?
Yeah, you're right. Very often the coach have their own match analyst, have their own scouts, which are more or less the same than match analyst. And
translator.
The issue is that FIFA doesn't expressly recognize the existence of these professions, these jobs. What does it mean? That if these guys have a contractual issue with the club, well, I'm not sure that FIFA and all the sport bodies you can think of have jurisdiction regarding these contracts, even if the lawyers assisting these guys have been so smart to put an arbitrational clause calling FIFA or TAS as competent judicial bodies. So, Lucio, this is a very fast, overview of the situation of coaches around the world. We can discuss about this longer, but I think time is over.
Yeah. If I don't know if you hear me well, but I had only two quick questions for you. Like the first one is related to what you said in the beginning, that it's not clear how football coaches can transfer, can move. And so my question is if coaches are allowed or not to have an agent. And
the answer is another question. Do you believe that if there is no provision regarding a specific matter in sport or out of sport, are you one of those who philosophically believe that since it's not forbidden, it's allowed? Or are you on the other side of the river telling that since it's not expressly provided in the regulations for that kind of topic, you're not allowed to do it? Because the answer is the rules regarding working with agents, working with intermediaries, do not mention the opportunity for a coach to have an agent. So, Andrea, sorry.
My answer to your question is another question. Do you live in the US or you live in China?
I'm quite lucky to live
because your philosophical approach is absolutely the right question, but the answer again is another question. Which philosophical approach?
No, the problem is that I believe that you're allowed to, but
I also believe you're allowed.
But in many jurisdictions, as Andrea said, the rules for agents are getting more and more strict and very
narrow.
Yeah, very narrow. You're right. So, if we are working in a country or in a jurisdiction where it's expressly provided that if a representation contract between an agent and his client, if this representation contract is not filed up with the federation, the league, or whatever entity you can think of, this contract is not valid, binding, choose the word, and the same rules do not provide or do not mention the power of an agent to assist a coach as an agent, the agent will have the signed mandate, the signed contract with the coach. This contract could not be filed up with the federation because the federation said, I'm not allowed to receive this. It's not a player, it's not a club. But there is another rule telling that if this contract is not filed up with the federation, it doesn't exist. Let's make it easy. So, philosophically, the answer is easy. I believe that it's not expressly forbidden, it's allowed, but then to work with it, it's much harder.
Yeah, I see. And my other question was related to the union of coaches, because before in his presentation, Andre mentioned FIFA Pro. And so I would like to ask you if FIFA Pro for coaches exists, and if it doesn't exist, if it would be necessary or not, in your opinion.
Well, Lucio, in the sport world and in the football world, something exists as soon as FIFA says that it exists. FIFA, it took a while to FIFA, but then FIFA agreed that FIFA exists and is a stakeholder. Agents are still not officially stakeholders. They exist as agents, but not as there is not an association representing agents for FIFA, even if we have at least 4 big associations. I know, I'm aware of. There are, of course, plenty more. And if you Google it, you will find at least 2 so sad world or European or national European or world associations of coaches. But as soon as FIFA does not recognize these entities like FIFA stakeholders or entities who are who is necessary to deal with, even if they are not expressly mentioned as stakeholders, well, these entities do not exist. You're asking me, is it necessary? The answer is no. Would it be useful? The answer is absolutely yes. And I tell you why. Because, of course, we think of Guardiola, Jurgen Klopp, Jose Mourinho, Antonio Conte, but wherever there is a football club, there is a coach, and this coach is doing for 30, 40, 50, 60,000 euros, 100,000 euros, and all of a sudden they don't pay him anymore. And if they don't pay a player, he's calling FIFA or who's calling FIFA and telling guys, look at what's happening in that country. Well, a coach can't do it. A coach is by himself. And if someone chooses not to pay him 100 euros, 1,000 euros, and we are all aware of how much a FIFA and or a tax proceeding costs. So I believe that someone providing just a little bit of help at global level for the coaches is something that should really be useful for all the system.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Before moving to Vittorio and Matthias, we received a very interesting question from our friend Andrea Oliveira from Brazil. I will highlight it, and you all are free to respond to him. Can you see it?
Yeah. Right, Pierre.
Well, Andre, in my experience, as I told you, FIFA hears the claims for those subjects that FIFA believes are part of the technical job of the coach. So, as I told you, the head coach, the assistant of the assistant, the third assistant coach, all working with the players on the pitch, and then the goalkeeper coach, and even the athletic coach who's working hand to hand with the head coach, choosing which kind of physical exercises the players have to do. Well, all of them, FIFA, we have case law, plenty of them telling that more or less FIFA agrees that it has jurisdiction about them and can hear these claims. Still, FIFA did not recognize subjects like Andrea mentioned, the most recent and probably most interesting one, the match analyst, who is a guy who never touches the pitch, who never wears the football shoes. He stays in a room with a computer and writing and checking and watching matches and matches and matches. And he is part of the staff because when the coach signed his contract with the club, said, okay, he is part of my staff, and we are 5 person on the pitch and 2 sitting in a room. But again, FIFA thinks that they are more closer to the employees of the club than they are to the staff, technical staff working with the coach. I believe that things will change, but nowadays, still, these hybrid subjects, these hybrid entities are still don't have a full citizenship within the FIFA jurisdiction.
I have a question for Pierfilippo.
I don't answer to your question.
Now, in my opinion, coaches are generally professionals that they have a very strong. They have experience. They are leaders in the club. They lead the team. So, why do you think this kind of professional have not yet organized themselves in an association and put some pressure on FIFA to have their activities regulated, or to have a jurisdictional body that could solve the dispute? We think is a situation that the reason is because in each country there is a different situation, and therefore not all the coaches are interested in having FIFA to regulate their own activities, or there is simply a sort of lack of awareness of the common interest that they all share of having FIFA a common regulation, like if a regulation is provided by FIFA.
I believe that all the reasons you mentioned are good. They are part of the reason. I have another reason why this hasn't happened still today. Up to date, it's probably because the international transfer of players started in the 80s, meaning 40 years ago. And FIFA, FIFA is quite slow in changing the rules and introducing new rules, new bodies. It took a while, but FIFA then understood that moving players from one country to another one was becoming common in the world. Coaches started to move from one country to another. I believe not not as an exception, but as a general rule, not later than 20 years ago. So it took a while, and then still the number of coaches moving around the world is they are so few. Every club has 30 players under contract and two coaches, and how many of them need FIFA to take care of their situation instead of the national sport or ordinary bodies. So up until today, it was a problem, but it was a small problem if we relate it to the nowadays it's changing. Big coaches are moving around the world, and I think this is one of the reasons. Andrea and I, we heard from FIFA that they are working, or they were working before the COVID-19 emergency that probably drew many of the resources that FIFA has, but they were working on a reform about the coaches situation. So we will see. I think 1 or 2 years from today, we will have good news. Andrea?
Yeah, if I may, I might have a less sexy answer. I have personal view on that as well. Goes into the anthropologic status of coaches. My view, one of the collateral reasons for that lack of collegiality is also that we're talking about a solist role. Coaches is an inherently solist job. And even the greatest and more inclusive staff, and we've seen many of them, as I'm sure you also, Vittorio and Matthias, have seen many of them, still revolve around the liability and honors borne by one man or one woman. Collegiality for players, union come from cloakroom itself as a natural aspect of their activity. The same does not hold true for coaches, and in my view, there is still quite of a widespread perception that the benefits of raising the hand do not outweigh the problems that one may issue with your own owner, president, or sport director the moment you are seen promoting a coaches union at international level. My humble view.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you guys. Still, I found it difficult to believe that Mourinho, Guardiola, I don't know, Ancelotti, coaches that they reach a level of independency and also of power, who could easily decide among themselves to sit and ask for some regulations that are not only transfer of coaches, which is actually something kind of weird to transfer a coach, although
it happens.
It happens. There are common experience that are coaches that have a penalty clause, let's say a buyout clause. We all know the transfer of Mourinho from Inter to Real Madrid. So it's common experience that there are clubs that they pay an amount to another club know how that payment is then regulated, because it's not really going through the TMS, so I don't know. But it's also a matter of providing for basic principle. Let's say, for example, FIFA is saying the contract of a coach can be no longer than, I don't know, 5 years, and has to have some minimum requirements to protect the professional coach. The coach, for example, has to be either on the first team or the second team or the third team, and he can do this, cannot do that. How many working hours? I know what you just said, Pierfilippo, is absolutely true. Sometimes you go in federations where there is nothing, and you need to provide in your contract writing everything, because if you say I'm a coach, doesn't mean anything. And so you need to protect your client and to avoid that there is an abuse by the club. And if the coach is no longer desirable, that they can put him on doing whatever they want. And I think that is a basic coverage of the basic principle of the basic rules. And I know that Mourinho doesn't need it. It's not, and also Guardiola. I think they could look at the other hundreds of thousands of coaches that they don't have such a strong position, and that they could benefit out of it. And that's kind of the fact that there are no, I mean, if you look around the world, there are a lot of coaches, but not as many as the players. So have more consciousness of their position, because it's, you know, a small number of professionals is easier to communicate and to share some sort of ideas and to enact that. It's every time, I mean, I have already heard your presentation sometimes, and I think it's always very interesting and so peculiar that still in 2020, a coach is something that we do not know. Now, in Italy, to be honest, we have a collective bargaining agreement. So I'm sure that also in some other federations, there are rules. It's not always in the jungle. But some other federations, they don't have the rules, and therefore FIFA could really make a difference.
Vittorio, you are absolutely right. And when you say other federations, we are not just thinking of small federation in a very far and isolated place of the world. Other federations paying coaches, where clubs pay coaches millions of salaries, they don't have any standard contract, any regulation, any draft to be used for coaches. So you have to draft it by yourself. It's great for us as lawyers, many hours of work for the client. But on the other side, it means that this subject is still need a lot of work done by FIFA.
I give you this idea free of charge. Create a FIFA Pro for coaches, then you can run the association. I think you will be successful. Right?
If you help us, we will.
We launched that idea. We called it FIFCO in a Lombardy Associates event. You remember last year in Edinburgh, Pierre.
Yeah.
We called it FIFCO.
Kind of provocation.
But again, I want to make a final comment, leaving paving the way to the part of presentation by Vittorio and Matthias. So the trade union, I think, is the following. I'm happy he mentioned big coaches, Mourinho, Capello, Lippi, Guardiola. Fantastic. Okay, my idea. Okay, if we use that as promoters of an idea, because they risk the less and they have no necessity for that. I agree with you. It would be horrible from a regulatory point of view. It would create another monster after the monster of agents to use those examples as a reference point. Because you, again, as in agents, you will say that in a minute, Vittorio. The problem here is many times FIFA judge the level of pollution looking at skyscrapers. The level of pollution, you don't look at it from skyscrapers. You look at the problem of pollution from the bottom of a skyscraper. And the jungle is the jungle. And the rule of the jungle is the rule of the jungle. It's not the rule of skyscrapers. And with that
Sibyllene hint. I leave the floor to agent, perhaps. Your microphone is on mute, Vittorio. Vittorio, the microphone.
Yeah. Okay. Lucio.
Yeah. I don't know if you heard me. I was saying that it was very nice to listen to your exchange of opinions, and I think that our viewers, our followers, enjoy it a lot. And I mean, this is the purpose of our talk, to have a nice exchange of opinions by great professionals like all of you. And after talking about FIFA RSTP amendments and football coaches contracts, even if there will need hours to talk about all of that, I think it's time to move to the last part of our talk, that is more focused on the FIFA regulation and working with intermediaries. And especially, I'm really curious to know from you what is FIFA thinking to change about regarding football agents. I heard about caps commissions.
I'm gonna take notes. I'm gonna take notes because Vittorio is an institution on that.
So please, I will give you the floor. I'm here to learn from you.
No. But the last time I was saying something about the new FIFA regulations. Then soon after my intervention, there was one of the boss of FIFA intervening and saying that FIFA knows everything and its regulation are perfect, and what they are doing is going to be a perfect regulation, and we should not criticize before actually having the possibility to read the new regulation. So I don't know if anybody in this meeting, in this seminar, has any fresh news about the timing of the new regulation. I don't know if there is any news. We are all to read, because now there has been so many discussions, so many seminars, so many interesting confrontation over the issue of the new regulation. But so far, I don't know if that was because of the virus. I don't know why, but it seems that they are not so. This regulation is taking some time, so maybe they are rethinking about some of the principle. They are reconsidering, or maybe they changed their mind. I don't know. So we're all looking forward to read the FIFA regulations. And I leave the floor to Matthias.
Yeah, so considering we don't have any regulations, I think it's good to go back to the communication of FIFA of January 2020, where they announced their reform package. And I just reread the communication they made. I mean it's 1 page and a half, more or less. And if I'm not mistaken, we can speak about this for hours and hours. Even in the second paragraph, they communicate what Pierfilippo already mentioned, that agents are not stakeholders, because they clearly write, these measures were the result of an extensive consultation process with stakeholders, between brackets, players, clubs, leagues, and member associations, as well as agents.
I cannot hear you well, Matthias.
No, I hear you. I hear him well. Probably you have problems.
I hear him well.
Yeah?
Yeah, we hear you well. Lucio, it's you.
Okay, so as I was saying, Pierfilippo is right. FIFA considers agents not to be stakeholders of the FIFA family, let's say. They are more outside of the outside of the system.
Outside of the door.
And I would like to see what they will do in their new regulations, whether they will be included. Will they have, as they mentioned in this communication, will they have a dispute resolution system? Will clubs and players be bound to actually pay their agents? Or do we still have to go directly to CAS? Do we still have to trust national system for these matters. I don't know if Vittorio has anything to say about the consultation process, but
no, okay. I was let's say invited in one of the meeting, and it was not. It was basically they call it consultation, but basically there was this board. There were the representative of the stakeholder, and interesting enough, the intermediaries are not stakeholders, so they were not involved in the writing of the regulation. They were just, they say, consulted. And in the consultation, what they did is they presented the new regulation. They presented the new principle. And as you can imagine, the presentation was kind of controversial. There was a lot of discussions, especially when they were talking the key issues that now Matthias will present, especially the limitation of the remuneration of the agent. And there were many questions, and the board, the members of the committee, they simply said what we wrote was the result of our thinking, and therefore they were not able to reopen the issues. They were just presenting. I think that we can see that as a sign of as an attempt to cooperate with the agent. So not just to present the final version, but at the same time, they cannot say that the agent, the intermediaries, were treated as stakeholders, because they were just presented with a regulation that were already written. And therefore, I think this was something that was not taken positive by the intermediaries. They would have liked to participate to the process of finding the principle and writing the regulation. As you probably know, when an intermediary is normally sitting on a side of a table, and on the other side of the table there are clubs, sometimes for players. It's kind of weird that the regulation, the intermediary regulation, were written by the other parties. Is the same situation as the regulation for the activities of a lawyer is written by the client of the lawyer. So is a strange feeling. I think that all the categories, the professions, it could be a surveyor, a lawyer, a notary public, they have rules that they regulate their own profession, but those rules are actually enacted by the same association. So is the bar association that is regulating the activities of the lawyer, or is the surveyor association, the architect association that is regulating the activities of their own affiliated? So the main request of the intermediary is, in the first place, let us participate to the process of creating the new rules, and not just calling us when the rules are already written and just to present the rules, because this is not participating. This is just being informed in advance, but and therefore they protested against this kind of situation. As we all know, if we go back to the substance, I mean, at the end is the main issue that is not only for FIFA but for all the federations. Are the agent members of the federation, or are just professionals that they work outside of the federation? The status of the agent, of the intermediary, is crucial to then understand what kind of process should be taken to regulate the activities of the intermediary. Because if we don't know if the intermediary are members or not, then it's also difficult to justify that the association is regulating the activities of the intermediary. And being members, being stakeholders, brings some sort of limitations, because they have to respect the rules, but also they have some rights. So they need to participate to the decision process. They need to participate to the elections, to the other process that regulate the activities of the federation or of FIFA. And this is a more general debate. And I think we should consider that before entering the issue of the regulations, because that's really makes a difference. It's really a streamline. It's either you go one way or the other way, and then you can react in one way or the other way. So I think this is a very interesting issue.
That's true. Before going into the actual measures, I think it makes sense to speak about the objective FIFA wants to obtain, because they mentioned transparency, the protection of player welfare, enhance contractual stability, and raise the professional and ethical standards of the agents. I think there is no one on the market, not an agent, not a lawyer, who opposes these kind of objectives. I think everybody wants the agency profession to be transparent. I think everybody wants to protect the players. However, I'm not really sure whether the measures that are going to be taken will reach this objective, because when we have the licensing system, or when now we have the registration system, if a person has bad intentions, an agent, a lawyer, whatever, he will do it, he will execute his bad intentions. So the first step, in my personal opinion, I don't know how Vittorio thinks about it, but my first idea would be to inform the player, empower the player so he knows what he is dealing with, educate him. I think this is the first step, rather than to start regulating in a sort of, in a very strong manner. Educate the parents of the player so they know what they are doing when they are speaking with the agent. And of course, considering that we are in the legal profession, hire a lawyer to assist you. I think this is, I mean, a very good first step. Again, when I go back to the communication of FIFA, they say that they are aiming to eradicate the law of the jungle, which is currently in place. I think the easiest proposal you could do was to not to regulate, but just take away the transfer system. If there's no transfer system, there's no jungle. I can see Vittorio looking at me in disbelief, but the jungle is created by the transfer system, not vice versa. Agents and possible excesses or an abusive situation, TPO, they are consequences of the transfer system. They're not a disease in itself. They're only symptoms. I don't know what Vittorio thinks about it. Any opinion?
No,
no opinion. Neutral.
I like the transfer system. If there's no transfer system, what are we going to do then? We lose a lot of interesting cases. No, we need a transfer system, definitely. We need to regulate it, and we need to I mean, when FIFA says that there is the law of the jungle, I think is somehow disrespecting all the federations that they have enforced a regulation. And in my opinion, if there are federations in UK, for example, the FA Federation, where the intermediary regulation is actually effective and is working in a smart way. It's easy. Everybody can be registered. It's transparent. I don't see why at the FA you could say that there is a jungle. I think the opposite. And so also in France we have a state law. How can FIFA say that there is the system is not regulated? Now in Italy we have a state law. We have also the jungle in Italy because we managed to have the jungle at the same time. It's fantastic. But yeah, I think FIFA should also look to those federations where there was a positive experience, where the deregulation was substituted by some rules that are more open, maybe, but still working and effective. And this is important.
Okay. And then lastly, before entering into the reform package itself, I see that FIFA mentions that football agents earned 653 million in commissions. I think they are referring to the commissions that are paid on an international basis for club services. And if you then go and you look at the amount that is paid in transfer compensation in 2019 on an international basis, so excluding nationally, we're talking about $7.3 billion US. So the amount of 600 million is 8.5%, 9%, if I'm not mistaken, which are in commissions. So I understand that from a media perspective, it might seem that there are excessive commissions being paid left and right, as FIFA says it. But it's not the case. It's simply not the case. It's the same as what Andrea said about the skyscraper. You have, if I again look at the numbers, there are 85% of the transfers where there was no transfer fee. And there's 15% of the transfers where there is compensation paid between the clubs. So, I mean, we are only looking at a very, very small portion of the market rather than the market in its entirety. Then for the reform package, FIFA starts brilliantly by introducing a cap on commissions to avoid excessive and abusive practices. Again, if there's if there is 8% more or less being paid as a commission, when you look at it on a relative scale, I don't know if we need a cap on commissions, to be honest. I don't know if Vittorio feels differently. Do we need one?
It was very interesting. It was a very interesting intervention in the last seminar of law in sport. Yeah, there was a professor. He was analyzing all the numbers, and it was at the end. The conclusion was that a cap will have a very strong impact on those transfers that are for small amounts, where the agent is not earning millions, but just a few thousand euros. If you put a cap on those transfers, basically the agencies cannot even pay the cost. And that will have an impact on the small agent rather than the big agent or the big transfer. So I think that was very interesting, and it's not an opinion, it's based on numbers, and I think I should take that into account.
True.
Yeah. Sorry for interrupting you. We received a very interesting question by Farid from Azerbaijan. Do you think the regulation should be adjusted so that it will be legally possible to pay commission to the intermediary not registered at the association, the particular transaction taking place? This is a general question for all of you.
Now, if we may respond, we don't think that. I mean, I think the opposite. I think that the system should be adopted everywhere, and the English system provides that the payment of the commission can be done only if the intermediary is registered. However, the registration is only an administrative process. You don't need to exam or other requirements. You just need to register. And this is actually increasing the transparency of the system, because all the transactions are registered, and therefore there is no hidden contracts or anything like that. I
have an even slightly different proposal. I'd bargain no caps against all intermediaries being sort of reported within sort of TMS for intermediation. So in my view, there should be a passport, a FIFA passport, which goes along the lines of what Vittorio is saying. There is no reason to avoid transparency here, actually. But even to make it more global, the moment you're registered in Italy, the moment you're registered in Turkey, and so by virtue of the future exam, or the future license that will be introduced, make these more professional after the possible mistake or certain mistake, as FIFA says, of 2015, well then, if a Turkish agent is legitimately carrying out that activity in Turkey based on a license, he should be able to do it on a worldwide basis. And as such, it could be reported on a TMS system without need for complex registration or presentation schemes, which really create no added value, but only layers of complexity and bureaucracy. That's my maybe a little bit extreme view.
And if I can just give my little opinion, I have been working in the system prior 2015, where there were regulations in force, and the system after 2015, where there was the deregulation. I strongly believe that the regulation where everyone can be an agent just with a signed contract did not work. It didn't work even in the more sophisticated system like Europe. I can't even imagine what happened in other places, in other jurisdictions. So I believe rules, registrations are needed. Probably how FIFA is thinking registration now is not the best solution, but to answer the question of Farid, I believe that every federation should have a registration system. What FIFA should do, in my opinion, is just to make an organization. It can't be so different the regulation to be an agent in Italy, in Spain, Portugal, France, England, or Germany. It doesn't help the system. Probably it still means that FIFA does not understand how important agents are for the football system. Of course, Lionel Messi doesn't need an agent. Big players don't need an agent. But if you think of a normal agent, middle level, at the end of the contract, he needs someone looking for a club for him. He doesn't do it by himself. And the club don't go around looking for players. The system doesn't work this way. So FIFA, when FIFA allows Italy to have a completely different regulation from England or from Spain, it means that they still don't understand how agents are part of the system.
Vittorio?
I see Matthias shaking his hand. I don't understand if it's a yes or no, or a no, but
I agree, but there's also the freedom of services on an EU level. If I am in Belgium and I have my own company and I do a certain service and I am in compliance with the Belgian laws and regulations, I think I should also be entitled to come to Italy and to provide my services.
And at the end, you're not.
I know.
You know it, and you're not allowed. You're not entitled to go to UK to. Let's not talk about the Brexit, but or in any other major federation. So this is what I still see needing a strong intervention from our big fathers of FIFA, not just getting into every count. They need to say, okay, these guys, they do exist, they work. We need them. We need to. Andrea is right. Let them. Let's build a system where the agent is not allowed anymore to do things less than clear. Checking all the money transfers through FIFA is perfect, and uploading contracts like it happens for the TMS, it's perfect. Let's go this way.
But also making a UEFA license dependent on the proper the proper sort of compliance and fulfillment of monetary obligations towards agents.
Yeah.
Either, I mean, what we all aim at, I think, Vittorio, Matthias, we would all agree. You either are part of the system or not. If you're part of the system, you've got duties, obligation, benefits, and and so on and so forth. You cannot share the problems and you don't share the benefits. So you share I mean, hybrid system just don't work.
Yeah.
No, because I don't know, probably our viewers know it, but just to be clear what Andrea is talking about, there are around the world plenty of clubs who simply avoid as a choice to pay two categories, agents
And lawyers.
and lawyers. Yeah. So why financial fair play or any other kind of control does not take in consideration lawyers and then agents?
Okay, interesting. I think then the next topic is just as interesting, and it's the limitation, multiple representation. If I'm not mistaken, in September 2019, they already announced that they would allow dual representation if the agent acts for the engaging club, so the buying club, and the player who was going to be engaged. I'm not sure how you would avoid a conflict of interest there, but still, I don't know, do you have any opinions on conflict of interest, Vittorio? No? No conflict. Okay. Anybody else, maybe?
Matthias, I think that, again, the conflict of interest and multi-representation has been another test to say that, I mean, we need a regulator, okay? And regulators need to regulate. So I'm maybe stating the obvious, but I want to take a position on that. I'm in for regulation, in football in general, and in this market as well. Problem is when regulation is insufficient or lack realism because they don't understand what the practice is. To say that you cannot represent more than one party just encourages external collaboration. So what's the sense for it?
No, I agree.
What is the sense, Matthias, of saying of, you know, having certain ban on the parties you can represent combined with caps that change according to the client? What is the sense of saying if you are together with a selling club, then it's 10% of transactions? Like I bring you the player and I'm sitting with you from day one. When do we sell? When do we sell? And what is the sense of saying, well, when I want to export my player, I have no incentive because I can work as much as you want, but if I don't have a collaboration on the selling side, I'm gonna earn 3% of the gross salary. This is just a proof of not even bad or good regulation, not even clear or unclear. It's a regulation by non-practitioners or by someone who has made these all sort of systems out of a paper castle.
Okay, very clear. Yeah, I agree with you in the sense that it's not consistent with practice. It would make sense if the would also be allowed to represent, for instance, the selling club at the same time of representing the player. Because what I hear is that clubs that are available to sell the player or to transfer the player permanently out of the club, they want the agent also to assist them because the buying club has to be interested in the player. So you sort of have this, I mean, it's a logical consequence of representing the player. Then the mandatory licensing system for agents, and then they also mention the objective to raise professional standards. We have one in Italy now, are the professional standards raised in the past year, or because in my opinion, I don't think, I think it's exactly the same as before, or am I missing something?
Sorry.
Vittorio doesn't want to answer this question.
No, but I think what you said before, Matthias, is that you can try to raise the level of the professionals, but you also have to raise the level of the client perception. So, because if the client is not aware of what should be the minimum standard, or what he should do or not to do with an agent, then we will always have somebody that is coming in the business. And unfortunately, it seems a little bit before 2015, what was, at least in Italy, the situation was that there were only a small portion of intermediaries that were actually following the rules, and there was a large portion of intermediaries that were not following the rules. And therefore, there was a paradox, because the rules were basically limiting the activities of the intermediaries that were following the rules. And the ones that were not following the rules, they had an advantage in the market because they had no rules, and therefore they were more effective in competing with the other agents. So we have to be careful, because all these limitations at the end, they create an incentive for intermediaries that are not registered, so professionals. They will have an advantage in the market because they are not registered, and therefore they can act without following the rules. And there is an incentive for the so-called abusivi, so the so-called people that are not registered, to work in the market. And this is something that we can prevent only if the players and the club, they are aware of what should be the minimum professional standards, what they should be the activities that the services that an intermediary shall provide, and the one that he shall not provide. And what Matthias said before is a very simple rule. I know that in England, if there is an employee that wants to terminate his employment contract, he needs to have a lawyer next to him. It also in Italy is a little bit different, but I think the simple requirement that when a player or a club, they sign a contract with an intermediary, there has to be a lawyer there, and there is a declaration that the lawyer has explained the consequence of the contract. It's quite simple. He will provide some new job for the lawyers, but it will also give the possibility for somebody to take responsibility to explain to the player what he's doing and what he's not doing. And this is a very simple way to improve the awareness of the client of what they are signing.
Vittorio and Matthias and Pierre, of course, I have a few on this one, but also on other aspects of RSTP, on other aspects of TPO. And so the level of regulation and distortions of regulations. I was listening to a brilliant, enlivening speech by former, how'd you say, alumni of Vittorio, Pekka. Brilliant in that he was sort of very clearly highlighting the huge clash we have today between 2 or 3 pillars that are in stark contrast. The mantra of contractual stability as the main justification for saying that football and sport is a special market with special rules, but also the industrialization and the globalization of this industry, the entertainmentification of the business, if you like. So we need to decide where we want to be, all right? Because if we want to be, milking the cow every day, which we are seeing in COVID times,
how difficult it is. It's fine. If we want to protect the specialty of sport, it's another story. Finding a balance is an okay story, but we need to face these problems. If we only go down from the bottom of it and only, you know, by seeing the 1%, as Marcos Motta always say, we look at the 1%ers here. What do we achieve? Let's try to be clear among practitioners, among those who eat from sport, where we want to be. Is this entertainment? Is this industry? Can we stop it from being, even if we think that sport should be sport, is not entertainment, can we stop the process? And if we cannot stop the process, how do we want to, you know, find proper ways to regulate? Is this by looking at 1%ers? So agents I put in the same basket as TPO, as many other things of the RSTP, Vittorio, where I see, and again, as I said, Pekka was fantastic in highlighting this concept, where this is the result of a clash. It's an abortion, basically.
It's true.
Yeah.
Do you agree, Pierre?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, finally, I think the clearinghouse has already been discussed before by Andrea, if I'm not mistaken, and then the same goes for the establishment of an effective FIFA dispute resolution system. It goes back to the roots: are agents inside the system? Are they outside the system? It appears by creating this kind of system of dispute resolution that agents would be inside the FIFA family, and this might be the start of becoming a stakeholder because they were also invited, as Vittorio said. And then finally, disclosing and publishing all agent-related work in transfers to increase transparency. I understand the part on disclosure. However, on publication, I think they will face some troubles. GDPR, for instance, you have to give consent. You can easily retract your consent under the GDPR. And I don't know whether it will benefit the transparency in the system as a whole. I think it's much better to be transparent between agent and player, or agent and club, depending on the relationship. And I think this should be the objective, rather than sort of publishing or mediafying or broadcasting the sensitive data to the world, if I'm not mistaken. So I think that's basically all the reforms that were proposed by FIFA. I don't know if anybody wants to add something, or if we have covered it all.
Dinner time.
Dinner time.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I mean, it's the first time that I have all speakers who were my professors. So it was a special pleasure for me to organize this webinar, and I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot, as well as all our viewers, and we are already having great feedbacks. So thank you once again, and look forward to meeting all of you very soon personally.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Thank you, Lucio. Thank you to all of the friends.
Thank you, Lucio. Thank you.
Bye.
See you guys.
you. See you soon.
Ciao. Ciao. Ciao.
Ciao, ciao.